GOP, on Democrats, on the anti-establishment fervor that we have watched by President Trump. Good evening, everybody. I'm Martha MacCallum, and this is the story tonight, the first big primary day of 2018. You've got 10 states in the United States of America where Democrat senators are up for re-election in states that were handily won by President Trump. And you've got 3 of those that have primaries this evening, as we await the first numbers out of Indiana, where Republicans are battling for the chance to challenge one of the most vulnerable Senate Democrats in the whole country, if not the most, in November. It is too early to project a winner in tonight's race in Indiana. There is a live look at Mike Braun's headquarters. He's sort of the outsider businessman candidate in this race. He's poured millions of his own money into the campaign. He is enjoying an early lead. It is too soon to say who's going to win here. The winner of this race will face off against Democratic Senator Joe Donnelly in November. Minutes from now, also polls will close in West Virginia, and this one's been a barn burner and a lot of fun to watch. Republicans hope that the winner of this wild GOP primary could perhaps defeat Joe Manchin, the Democrat in West Virginia. The wild card in that race, former coal baron and ex-con, whose probation ends this evening at 1 minute after midnight, Don Blankenship. What did he do today? When others were campaigning, he went shopping for a new suit.
What is the thought there?
Well, I think people have made up their minds, so we need to get a few things done and get ready for the general.
Very confident Don Blankenship in the suit store there. We're watching the polls closing just minutes from now, also in some key places in Ohio and North Carolina. So we've got great folks here tonight with lots of expertise on what to watch. David Bossie, former Trump deputy campaign manager, Fox News contributor, and he's also the president of Citizens United, which is backing Republican AG Patrick Morrisey in the West Virginia race and Republican Jim Renacci in the Ohio Senate race.
That's right.
Chris Stirewalt is with me as well, native West Virginian and Fox News politics editor. Mo Alethi, executive director of Georgetown University's Institute for Politics. He's also a Fox News contributor. And Capri Cafaro, former Ohio State Senate Minority Leader. Welcome to all of you. The excitement is building tonight as we watch this, and we're going to get some indications, and some people are going to feel really happy at the end of tonight, and some are going to feel like their dreams have been sunk. Chris Stirewalt, let me start with you. As you look across the map here, what stands out to you? What are you watching?
Well, the first thing is I want to give a shout out to my former tailor, Tony Peranzino, who gets it out.
Tony?
That's my former tailor, Don Blankenship. Of course it is. Of course it is. It's a small state. But Don Blankenship with the plug. You got to love it. Look, I just came up from the decision desk, and I can tell you that anybody who tells you that they know how this West Virginia race is going to turn out doesn't know what they're talking about, because we have never seen a contest like this in West Virginia, ever. There's going to be bigger turnout. There's more interest. They've never had a Fox News debate there. They've never had a Republican primary with $10 million in it. Nobody knows what it's going to be, and that's why we play the game. It's awesome. Yeah.
David Bossie, your guy there, Patrick Morrisey, and as Chris said, we really don't know how this is going to turn out, but this race has gotten a whole lot of attention. And Don Blankenship, who was trailing, the polls are so tricky in these kind of races, it's hard to know how reflective they really were, but he was trailing, and then it looked like he picked up a bit of momentum. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that the West Virginia race is an incredibly interesting one for the country as a whole, but I'm hopeful that that Patrick Morrisey, the two-time Attorney General of West Virginia, wins. I think he'll be the best candidate in the general election. However, if Morrisey loses to Jenkins, I think we have a terrific chance, if either of those are the nominee, to beat the incumbent Democrat senator. The president won that state overwhelmingly by about 34 points. It is a place that Donald Trump can really help us defeat an incumbent U.S. senator that we need to beat. So it is going to be a long road if Blankenship unfortunately wins that race. All right.
We'll have a lot to talk about in either case there when we get some more information on that. Capri, let me go to you. Let's talk Ohio. What are you watching there?
Absolutely. A number of things. First and foremost, I think the Democratic primary for governor, we have a matchup, 4 individuals. The 2 leading folks in this race, Rich Cordray, the former Attorney General of Ohio, former treasurer, and most notably the former head of the Consumer Protection Finance Bureau for the last 8 years, versus Dennis Kucinich, Dennis the Menace, who was a member of Congress for a number of years and, famously bankrupt the city of Cleveland, even though the Cleveland Plain dealer, actually endorsed Dennis Kucinich for this race. We have two other individuals. I actually voted for Joe Schiavone, my former colleague in the Ohio Senate, who's also former Senate Minority Leader, because he's a guy who's common sense and actually could, I think, bring the Trump voters back into the fold, since he's from the Mahoning Valley like I am. But it'll be interesting to see, because this is really a matchup between sort of the progressive wing in Dennis Kucinich and the establishment wing in Rich Cordray, that he's son to have the endorsement of the AFL-CIO. So we'll see how this goes down.
The establishment wing with Rich Cordray?
I mean, look, comparatively to Dennis Kucinich, it's the establishment wing, okay?
Well, that just pretty much says it all, doesn't it?
Exactly. And guns have been playing a big role in this race. The two other things to watch in Ohio are two congressional races. One, which is the vacant seat being left by Jim Renacci, who is running for United States Senate, endorsed by Donald Trump, and I think the favorite certainly in the Senate primary here to challenge Sherrod Brown. In that open seat, it's predominantly the 16th congressional district in northeastern Ohio. Is a Republican-leaning seat. On the Republican side, you have two main contenders in Gonzalez and Hagan. Hagan is a young woman, for a current state representative. Gonzalez is a former football star, raising a lot of money. So I think that's going to be a close race. And then finally, the race down in for the special election in the House race vacated by Pat Tiberi. That's basically the Tea Party Freedom Caucus versus the establishment down there. So, anybody's guess. That's a free-for-all down there.
That was impressive. That was very good.
She's exactly right.
Get that woman a whiteboard. Thank you, Capri. Mo, your thoughts on, the establishment candidate, Rich Cordray, versus Dennis Kucinich in Ohio. An interesting race, to be sure, to see who's going to take the spot of Governor Kasich, who is term limited and vacating his spot. He has presidential aspirations of his own at this point, as he did once in the past as well. What do you think, Mo?
Yeah, look, I think there are people out there that are trying to turn this Ohio Democratic primary into some sort of rehash of establishment versus progressive or center-left versus left, and I don't think that's what this is at all, right? I think Cordray seems to be the guy who's walking into this primary with some momentum. To say he is not a progressive, the guy headed up the CFPB for 5 years, right? He was the guy taking on Wall Street, which is what progressives say they want.
He's closely aligned with Elizabeth Warren, just to give folks at home, a feel for where he's coming from. That's his base.
And Kucinich, I mean, there was a time when the guy maybe represented sort of the left of the party. I don't know that's this time, right? I don't know that that's what he is. He kind of represents more like the hand grenade throwing wing of the party. He's being supported by Our Revolution, which is the Bernie Sanders-backed super PAC. But those guys aren't really Democrats, right? They're sort of the hand grenade wing of the base. And so, this is more kind of like the disruptors versus the progressives, and it just kind of shows how much, sort of the shift in sort of the power dynamic within the Democratic
I got to
Party.
leave it there, because we're going to have a lot of numbers coming out, and we're going to bring you guys back, and we're going to be following this throughout the evening. There's a lot of characters out there, right? I mean, just looking at that whole list, there are some very interesting characters out there in these races tonight. So we're going to cover it all. Thank you, guys. We'll be back with you in a little bit.
Thanks.
Coming up tonight, new documents raising fresh questions about torture. U.S. enhanced interrogation methods, as others prefer to call them, and Gina Haspel, President Trump's pick to lead the CIA, all on the eve of her Senate confirmation hearing, plus strong words from President Trump today on why he has decided that he's given it a chance and it is time to pull the United States out of the Iran nuclear agreement. Staff Sergeant Robert Bartlett, a retired U.S. soldier injured by an Iranian bomb in Iraq, shares his deeply personal reaction. Straight ahead.
If the regime continues its nuclear aspirations, it will have bigger problems than it has ever had before.
Breaking tonight, if there was ever any doubt about how President Trump felt about the Iran deal, that was laid to rest today. A stunning and really very forceful statement by the president today, essentially saying the deal is done. He laid it out in no uncertain terms this way.
Iran's bloody ambitions have grown only more brazen. The Iran deal is defective at its core. If we do nothing, we know exactly what will happen. In just a short period of time, the world's leading state sponsor of terror will be on the cusp of acquiring the world's most dangerous weapons. I made clear that if the deal could not be fixed, the United States would no longer be a party to the agreement. I am announcing today that the United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal. We will be instituting the highest level of economic sanction. America will not be held hostage to nuclear blackmail. We will not allow American cities to be threatened with destruction, and we will not allow a regime that chants death to America to gain access to the most deadly weapons on earth. The United States no longer makes empty threats. When I make promises, I keep them. In fact, at this very moment, Secretary Pompeo is on his way to North Korea in preparation for my upcoming meeting with Kim Jong-un. Finally, I want to deliver a message to the long-suffering people of Iran. That the future of Iran belongs to its people. They are the rightful heirs to a rich culture and an ancient land, and they deserve a nation that does justice to their dreams, honor to their history, and glory to God. There has been enough suffering, death, and destruction. Let it end now.
Iran immediately threatened to start the wheels churning on their nuclear weapons plan unless the European partners can keep this deal afloat. Also, right after the president's statement, reports that Israel carried out strikes near the Syrian capital of Damascus, a reinforcement of the bond between the United States and Israel after the announcement of the exit from this deal. Joining me now, someone who has been waiting for this decision and working towards this decision on the Hill for a very long time. Retired Staff Sergeant Robert Bartlett, who has joined us several times over the last year, an advisor to United Against Nuclear Iran. He was personally injured by an Iranian roadside bomb while he was serving our country in Iraq. There's a look at the vehicle that he was driving at the time. That was back in 2005. Long outspoken, as I said, against this deal. Sergeant Bartlett, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Your thoughts as you watched the president speak those words today?
Thank you, Mr. President. I really appreciate it. It's a great anniversary for me. I mean, 13 years ago last Thursday, we got blown up. I was cut in half in the left corner of my temple down through my jaw. My gunner, Todd Bishop, lost his legs. My truck commander, God rest his soul, Sergeant Brooks, William Brooks, was killed instantly. And this new adventure of mine started, to do the right thing, to continue to try to protect the country.
I know that you were horrified by the lines of this deal. $180 billion in cash was flown to Iran and, into the pockets, essentially, of Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Iranian Republican Guard. Talk to me about what you believe he did with that money and why you think this deal was such a mess from the beginning.
Oh, we know what he did with the money. He began spreading more terror. That's exactly what he did. It went right to his military. They increased their GDP by 10-fold that same year. And then all of a sudden you saw more things happening in Yemen and other countries that they're spreading their terrorism in. We know exactly what they did with the money because the people are starving. That's why there was some uprising, because the money wasn't going to them. It was try to spend some money to try to fix something, to buy them off, so they wouldn't build a weapon. It doesn't make sense. It's Chicago politics.
So, as you know, President Obama, John Kerry, everybody really reacted very strongly to this. Here's President Obama. The consistent flouting of agreements that our country is a party to risks eroding America's credibility. It puts us at odds with the world's major powers. The decision to put the JCPOA at risk without any Iranian violation of the deal is a serious mistake.
Yeah. Right, you know what? Diplomats got killed under his office, and Ambassador Stevens, and so these are all policies that his State Department and his people stood by, and put this thing together. It just got more people killed, and there was going to continue to get more people killed by the spread of terrorism. So how could giving billions of dollars to a country who hasn't stopped spreading terrorism first, and saying, you know what, we'll give you billions if you just don't build nuclear weapons? How about no? You're already terrorists, you're already spreading terrorism, we're not giving you any money. We're just going to put more sanctions on and clean them up, just like we did with North Korea. It just didn't make sense to give them billions of dollars in the middle of the night. Come on, what are we doing? What are you doing to those people who died for this country, like my friends?
I know you named your son after your friend William.
That's right.
And he was born a few years back.
Yeah.
Sergeant Robert Bartlett, thank you very much. We wanted to hear from you because we knew that you were going to be very moved and very happy about what happened, because you've been working on it for a long time. So we thank you for being here tonight. Good to see you as always, sir. And thank you for your service.
I appreciate you very much. Appreciate it.
You too.
Thank you.
So President Trump's decision today drawing some criticism, as we've said, at home, and some abroad. European leaders called it regrettable. You know that they have put together a statement to try to hold the United States into this agreement. President Obama and John Kerry, his former Secretary of State, who's been working behind the scenes to try to convince Zarif, the foreign minister of Iran, to, find a way to stay in this deal. Joining me now, Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. He is also a member of the Foreign Relations Committee. Good to see you, Senator Coons. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thanks for a chance to be on again, Martha. And I want to convey to Sergeant Bartlett, his story was very powerful, and a reminder that all of us who see Iran clearly as a terrorist threat in the region, Democrats and Republicans, need to continue to work together to make sure that we find a way to successfully constrain Iran's ongoing bad and threatening behavior.
So Sergeant Bartlett, I think, would ask, why would we ever sign an agreement that entailed sending $180 billion in cash to Iran that was then used on things like their effort to, to kill people during the civil war in Syria? How is that ever a good idea?
Well, first, because we didn't. $180 billion in cash did not get sent to Iran from the United States. But more important than whether or not the number is right is whether or not the spirit is right. I understand why Sergeant Bartlett would be angry about that agreement, and I understand some of President Trump's criticisms of the Iran agreement. It did not intend to deal with the ballistic missile program. It did not intend to deal with their domestic human rights problems, and it did not deal with their support for terrorist organizations in the region. In fact, the Iran deal specifically allowed us to continue to sanction those activities by Iran. What I wish the president had done instead is to work with our European partners, France, Germany, the UK, to impose tough sanctions on Iran for the things they're doing in Syria.
But Senator,
in the support of Hezbollah,
I'm sorry,
in the
don't
region,
you think that's what's
which
going to
I
happen
think would
now?
be more constructive.
I mean, the president has a very interesting foreign policy doctrine, I think, that is emerging when you look at all of the different areas that he's working in. He basically says, let's join all of these ideas together. Let's not do, let's join trade. Let's join our trade agreements. Let's look at all of these issues across the board, and let's hold Iran accountable for its behavior. Let's not strike a deal with Iran that doesn't force any behavior change from this country that is the #1 state sponsor of terror. So it's highly likely that at this point we're going to start to see a negotiation that gets closer to exactly what you want.
I hope that is the case, and if it is successful, that would be a good outcome. But, Martha, given that we've got right in front of us the challenge of a nuclear-capable North Korea that has developed ballistic missiles and the upcoming negotiation between President Trump and Kim Jong-un, I did urge him to give the Iran agreement more time and to give our European partners more time, because, frankly, we now raise questions with them, with the Chinese and the Russians, and with the North Koreans about how reliable we could be in any future agreement. Well, and if Iran chooses to walk away from this agreement and resume enrichment, we don't have a clear answer or a strategy from President Trump and the administration over how we're going to deal with a restarted and renewed Iranian program. The only reason that we had the pressure to really get them to the table in the first place was allies like South Korea, India, and others who stopped buying oil from Iran to reassemble the global powers that will force Iran back to the table will take time.
You know, I mean, one of the things that they want now is for all of those deals with Iran between European countries and other countries to start to be unwound as part of this, to make those sanctions very powerful. Condoleezza Rice, you know, was asked about this earlier this week. She said, you know, if we get out of this deal, it's going to be just fine. She said it was rushed into in the first place, and we gave away a lot of things that we never should have given away. So we'll see. You know, we'll watch what happens, but there's definitely a lot of people who are unhappy with it, as you are tonight, but we'll see. Let's hope for the best. Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you, Martha.
Good to see you tonight. So, as you know, it is election night, and we are watching it closely. We've got results coming in from Indiana. Still too early to project the winner, given how many votes are in so far. But whoever does win this race, and you can see Mike Braun, who was the outsider candidate at 41%, is enjoying an early lead there. He is sort of the Trump outsider. We're watching that one very closely. Whoever wins there will go up against Joe Donnelly, the current senator. And in less than 6 minutes, the polls will close in Ohio, in West Virginia, and North Carolina. We're live on the ground in all of those places with the very first results coming up next. So we are about 3 minutes away from the polls closing in 3 battleground states tonight. You've got North Carolina, West Virginia, which we've been watching very closely here, and Ohio, which also has some really interesting races. So Peter Ducey's live at Don Blankenship's headquarters in West Virginia as the former coal baron and ex-con looks to beat Evan Jenkins and Patrick Morrisey in that GOP Senate primary. And Ellison Barber is live in Dennis Kucinich's headquarters in Ohio, where the former congressman is looking to beat Obama administration official Richard Cordray for the Democratic nomination there. So let's go first to Peter Ducey in West Virginia. Hi, Peter.
Martha, Don Blankenship has self-funded his entire $3.5 million campaign with the exception of one donation for $1,000. So nobody is telling him what to do, and that's why his primary day included a trip to the tailor to get fitted for a new suit and a 2-hour nap. His final day radio ad actually repeated establishment Republican attacks against him for being a bigot or mentally ill, but he explains to voters in the ad that even if those things are true, he thinks he'd be a better choice than Congressman Evan Jenkins or Attorney General Patrick Morrisey. But Morrisey and Jenkins have something that Blankenship doesn't, and that is the blessing of President Trump in a state where Trump beat Clinton by 42 points in 2016. Morrisey's closing argument today was all about electability. He believes that after the Fox News debate last Tuesday, this became a two-man race between himself and Blankenship, and that his resume is the only one conservative enough to flip Democratic Senator Joe Manchin's seat. Morrisey watching results tonight in Kearneysville, while Congressman Evan Jenkins is down in Barbersville. Remember, he was the front-runner in the Fox News poll released 2 weeks ago tonight. Jenkins told us today there's a little bit of nervousness, but that he's put a lot into an aggressive campaign, and he's looking forward to the results. Here in Charleston, Blankenship, whose probation ends at midnight, is set to watch the results with about 100 family and friends. And we're told that soon they're all going to be handed red and white hats with a message to the Senate Majority Leader. They're going to say, ditch Mitch. Martha?
We heard a lot of that in that race. Thank you very much, Peter. All right, let's go over to the Democratic Senate primary in Ohio, where Fox News correspondent Ellison Barber is live at Dennis Kucinich headquarters tonight in Cleveland. Hi, Ellison.
Hi, Martha. There's been, of course, a lot of concern in places like West Virginia among Republicans concerned that perhaps one candidate might be too far right and then perhaps they won't be very electable come the general election. To some degree, that exact same concern exists here in the Ohio gubernatorial primary, but on the opposite side of the political spectrum. That is the concern in many ways for Democrats here. Richard Cordray is backed by the more establishment side of the Democrat Party. He served as the top consumer watchdog under the Obama administration. Former Congressman Dennis Kucinich is backed by the more progressive Bernie Sanders wing of the party. There are other Democrats in this race, but Cordray and Kucinich are very much considered to be the top two candidates at this point. On the Republican side, in both the gubernatorial race as well as the Senate primary race, President Trump is a constant theme. Most Republican candidates seem to be trying to prove that they're more like him than their opponents are. Of course, President Trump traveled to Ohio this past weekend and he endorsed Republican Senate hopeful Congressman Jim Renacci. That race is all on the Republican side because the incumbent senator, Democrat Sherrod Brown, does not have a primary challenge. The big question is, did that visit from President Trump on Saturday help Congressman Renacci? Did it help turnout? Did it help convince people to go for him over the other Republicans? Of course, it'll be a little while before we know that, but the Board of Elections say they expected about 1.6 million people to show up and vote today. The total number of registered voters here in Ohio, Martha, is about 7.9 million.
Seen some pretty good turnout so far in some of these races. Ellison, thank you very much. Also, Fox News can now project that, this is not a big surprise, Senator Joe Manchin will easily defeat the challenger on his primary side, Paula Jean Swearingen, to win the Democratic primary. So there's one that we can tell you about. And we don't know yet who's going to win on the Republican side and who will go up against Joe Manchin in the fall. Don Blankenship, Evan Jenkins, who's a current congressman, and the Attorney General Patrick Morrisey are all vying for that position. And as soon as we get some numbers rolling into West Virginia, we're all very interested to see how that's going to work out. So we'll get those up on the board as soon as we have them. In the meantime, this breaking story, you may remember New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman going after Harvey Weinstein, one of the many people that he has gone after as AG in New York. But he really was a champion, we thought, for the Me Too movement.
Women were coerced into facilitating Harvey Weinstein's misconduct. Sometimes they were targets themselves. If they refused, they were threatened.
So he has gone head-to-head with powerful politicians, including at times President Trump himself, who tweeted back in 2013, quote, "Weiner is gone, Spitzer is gone. Next will be lightweight AG Eric Schneiderman. Is he a crook? Wait and see. Worse than Spitzer or Weiner." That was March of 2013. But now, apparently what goes around comes around. 4 women have spoken out saying, yes, he did it to me too. In this bombshell report, the New Yorker writes about one accuser saying, quote, "It's torturous for me to do this," as she puts it. But what do you do if your abuser is the top law enforcement official in the state, which on many occasions he was happy to remind these women of? Hours after the New Yorker was published, Eric Schneiderman had already resigned. Here to react, Kimberly Guilfoyle, co-host of The Five and former attorney and prosecutor. Kimberly, good to see you. This is quite a story, you know, and I mean, obviously it's a New York-based story, but this is a person who went after President Trump, went after Chris Christie, and, you know, champion of women. These stories are unbelievable.
It certainly has national implications. And like you said, working as a former prosecutor in the area of domestic violence and sexual assault, women and children that have been physically and sexually abused, these are some of the most difficult cases to bring forward. And working with them in terms of trying to get them to come forward to tell their story when they've been abused by someone, especially someone, like you said, top law enforcement person, someone that used threats and intimidation to keep the women silent. You saw 4 brave women came forward as it relates to the New Yorker piece. And as some of the executives and producers here at Fox News know, I've been working on an investigation into this case as well. I've been working with one of the victims of Eric Schneiderman and her horrific ordeal that she endured at his hands. She, too, was also very afraid to come forward and to tell her story, which is unbelievably harrowing and compelling. And she is not one of the 4 that are mentioned in this New Yorker piece.
Wow. I mean, so we already know there's more.
That's correct.
Then this woman. Were you speaking with her before this story? I mean, this story came out last night, so you've been talking with her for a while?
Yes.
And she's terrified to come forward?
The past couple of months. But she has now, you know, really made the decision to be able to come forward. She's afraid, you know, she's a single, you know, mom like myself, and it's very difficult when you think about that type of thing and you think about going up against someone very powerful, but you see these 4 brave women were able to do it. And I think, you know, it's so compelling, and it really gives strength to others that have suffered at the hands of, you know, physical abuse.
This case, you know, I mean, you know, you look at some of these cases are all across the spectrum in terms of what people are accused of. This is beating. I mean, he was, according to these women's reports, hitting them so hard in the head, by the eyes, that they had to go to physicians. She was bleeding in her ear. She couldn't hear for weeks.
Yeah, one of the women detailed that she was hit and struck so hard in the side of the head and the ear that she had the ringing in the ear, that she had blood in her ear. She saw, in particular, that woman saw Dr. Gwen Corvin, who is an ENT, who examined her. So there's medical records. There are medical records as well in the case that I have been investigating and working with the victim. So something very
What's going to happen legally? What's he up against?
Over a long period of time. He's looking at, potential misdemeanor or felony charges depending on the nature of the abuse and the number of women coming forward. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office has opened a case. Long Island has also opened an investigation to see the nature of the abuse and what kind of charges could be filed. It's very serious. It's criminal conduct, certainly assaultive conduct, battery over a repeated period of time. He used the phrase role playing.
Right.
It is not role playing when you physically beat and abuse a woman.
That's what I was just going to say. One quote from the New Yorker piece by Ronan Farrow. He says these women, one after another, were adamant. This is not 50 Shades of Grey.
Correct.
This was not an area of gray at all in their minds. This was assault over and over again.
Yes, it was dark.
Stunning.
It was ominous. It was something threatening and name-calling, abusive. It's very difficult when you even think about it and you hear some of these details and the details that I have heard.
Terrible.
And people will have no misconception that this wasn't consensual and that this was criminal in conduct.
Well, Kimberly, thank you. And we look forward to hearing more about your investigation as you move forward. Thanks so much. Good to have you here tonight.
Thank you for having me, Martha.
So stick around. We are getting some more numbers in the election results from Ohio and West Virginia and Indiana. This is politics across the nation tonight, folks. You see these conference rooms and hotel spaces where people are waiting to flood in support of their candidate when we get some winners tonight, and there'll be some who have to give concession speeches as well this evening. All of that just hours before something else that's very important. Gina Haspel will be on the Hill tomorrow for her confirmation hearing. New documents have surfaced, and they are raising questions about her role in the CIA Enhanced Interrogation Techniques program. Liz Cheney joins us with some thoughts about Gina Haspel's nomination next.
She is the most qualified person to ever be nominated to run the CIA. She has the best background, the best preparation. I think she's exactly the right person at exactly the right time.
Everyday Verzenio.
President Trump's pick to lead the CIA, Gina Haspel, who he calls tough on terror, back on Capitol Hill today. This is what they do. They make the rounds, meet with everybody who is going to be at the hearings. We expect that it's going to be kind of tense in there potentially tomorrow as some contentious confirmation hearings get underway. Her nomination reignited a fierce debate over controversial Bush-era enhanced interrogation tactics that were used after 9/11. And then further fanning those flames, BuzzFeed today releasing hundreds of CIA documents about the program and the black sites. Here now, Representative Liz Cheney of Wyoming, daughter of former Vice President Dick Cheney during that era. Liz, good to see you. Thanks for being here this evening.
Good to be with you.
I want to ask you about that, but first I want to ask you about your reaction to the Iran deal, because I know that you have some thoughts on that tonight as well. So let's start there.
I think the president did exactly the right thing today. President Trump's decision to withdraw from the deal was courageous. It's perhaps the worst deal the United States has ever entered into, had no anywhere, anytime inspections, no access to military sites. The Iranians got to continue to enrich. It was actually a pathway to a nuclear weapon. It didn't prevent them from obtaining one. And the president was right. What he's done now is send a very clear message. We are not going to be bound by phony deals. We're not going to be in a situation where we're taken advantage of. And frankly, it sends a terrific message also to the North Koreans. It says, look, we are absolutely committed to making sure that the world's worst sponsor of terror does not get access to a nuclear weapon. It was a brave, courageous decision.
I guess how would you advise her to handle those questions?
Look, I think that we've got an effort underway.